Glenn and I operate at a different horizon. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Joyce Lee. Joyce is a native of Oakland who is a talent that she's living out that was honed in local schools, clubs, slams, and bookstores, and then further challenged and polished and embraced by spending significant time overseas in Germany and Turkey. This is a woman of adventure. Lee was the 2009 and 2010 Oakland Grand Slam champion, the 2014 IL List champion, and she's a featured storyteller on WNYC's Snap Judgment. Her first book of poetry, My Soul is a Witness, was published by Bootstrap Press last year. Some of you might know that I have an annoying habit of advocating for the funding of literature, and I just want to shout out that it's small presses like Bootstraps that are bringing new writers into print. It's places like Small Press Distribution where all of you can run out and order her book this afternoon. And it's artist spaces like The Lab, where she's reading tomorrow evening with Tongo Ice and Martin, that are a really important part of the fabric that make Oakland and the Greater Bay Area a great literary community. If you go online, you can read a story of how Lee, as an emerging slam poet, used to try out her new work at Dorsey's Locker, which is an iconic Oakland restaurant that is no longer with us, part of our space loss story. But at that restaurant, that was a place where the crowd was always loud and buzzing, and Lee knew that her work was good if it fell silent. So I ask you to join me in making a whole lot of noise for Joyce Lee, and you'll be silent soon enough. Joyce Lee.
My great-grandpa Murray Adams was the first to tell me about salvation. He was born old to me, and I had already been in the world 6 full years, but his hands were wrinkled, and people seemed to live to serve him. I always attributed that to his kindness. He always whispered his words, even to women. The cotton fields and wide farms he referred to in his sermons, I never saw in Oakland. And I always wondered why my mama would nod in agreement every time he spoke, since she was practically raised in Oakland too, was around my age when she left the South. I always wondered why the thugs in church mothers' heart and sons would yield and bow under my great-grandpa's blessed, oil-drenched and trying hands. I always attributed that to his non-judgmental attitude. I never heard him lead the church in holding a grudge against folks with a way of life different from ours. I was around 15 when I realized that folk got a way of life different from ours, and everybody don't have a great-grandpa like Murray Adams. Everybody needs a great-grandpa like Murray Adams to tell them about salvation, to hold them real close and special, like he didn't have over 50 other grandchildren and great-grandchildren in need of the same attention and say, you know, Jesus bled and died for me and didn't say nothing about it. That's why I love him. It's only right, loving somebody who loved you first. The hundreds of residents on 98th and Bancroft, East Oakland, California, knew my mother's name. It lay sweet like country yams on their tongues, because she was fine and sweet and a good cook, and still is. She was that young woman who knew how to cook like an old woman and blended in with all 5 of us girls she was raising all by herself. And every Saturday night, like clockwork, no matter how many times the world raped her that week, no matter how many subtleties shouted at that little black dirt road 1-horse town Arkansas gal, my mama would put on her lipstick and rouge and go broke on gin and boxed wine and gumbo ingredients and throw a party and laugh with all 10 of her brothers and sisters on the weekends. I got to get to know and fight and love Too many cousins in one room to count on the weekends. Lord, did us little ones hate the drama and noise and the dancing and the laughing and the drinking and the crying the adults did, usually all in one night. We hated the ambulances and the boyfriends and the cops, and we hated the Mount Everest pile of dishes left for us in the morning. The living room, the bathroom, full of things the adults used to forget the hard times with that we had to pick up and clean before going outside to play. We hated a lot of things until we got older and had weekdays worth forgetting of our own. My name is Joyce. I appreciate y'all for listening to me, for having me here. I can be intimidating, but I am so cool to talk to. If anybody wants to talk to me after, you know, us artists, we are quite insecure. So if you could just pat me on the back and tell me to keep going, I'll keep going, okay? All right, so last one. It is winter and Oakland is covered in snow. The sidewalks are bleeding and some stores are still open on the holidays. Money is still green. I am still black. Power is still white. Death and taxes couldn't be sure. In my small studio apartment, it is always the hottest summer, and I live alone. That's better than the dead who live with many, or so they say. Keep your smile big and your head down to keep it that way, or so they say. Don't say too much, they say too much. So much they even determine who I should be. And stealing still has that whites only sign. I'm only allowed to buy. I have boycotted Christmas for the past 5 years. I should take no surprise when Christmas is boycotting me and badge and trembling cold, just like this white Oakland winter. Listen, my words are only as heavy as my heart. And in Oakland, United States of America, your heart can only be as heavy as your skin. Your skin is covered in snow right now, and you are willing to bust through every window and make a fireplace out of 10,000 child lynching pigs to keep warm. You're willing to move to your nearest ghetto for heat, and for the first time ever, for the first time, you might muster up enough courage to speak in order to live. But that's only if you're trying to survive. And oh, did you know that snow could talk? It tells you of the climate's temper, and then it tells you what to buy, and therefore it's telling you what you can or cannot afford and whether or not you should move somewhere else and how fast. Did you know its winds can control your pace, slow you down, choke you until silent, until death? Did you know that the cold will kill even the silent? Those of us who move so little that we look and feel frostbitten. We stand immobile and stiff as if the cold knows mercy. I was thawed out to bury and survived, only to have my life threatened daily, with hopes that my tongue would freeze, with hopes that the story could tell me. But this Oakland cold, you know, it's numbed me back to all of my senses. And one day I suddenly awoke in the summer of my empty apartment, hearing helicopters and sirens and muffled talk about some black boy named Ferguson who was executed by the law without ever having gone to trial, without ever having faced one day in jail. He must be from Oakland like me. I wonder if he knows the warmth of being born and living and dying black in the same place, because so many of us from Oakland, we can't afford to do that anymore ever since the snow came and just took over, and it's gotten so all of a sudden cold here that the streets are bleeding ancestors and crying tear gas, and the cotton-colored sky is adorned in helicopter bows, and the wind is whistling with new white neighbors who all hum in a gentrified tune while carrying signs that say Black Lives Matter. And the snow is still falling, still asking, since when?